Hi, I'm Layla Johnston from Shift Run Stop and Hack Circus, and you're listening to the Bite High No Limit podcast.
Today I'm joined by Nathan Dane, who is running NMS CEEFAX, which is a CEEFAX service that can be viewed online via phone or via your PC. Can even go via, I think, your Amazon stick as well, can't it, Nathan?
Well, you can access it with anything with a web browser, pretty much. It's completely web-based, and the web-based part is all it's Alistair Cree's viewer, so it's amazing. But the actual content is what I do, and that also you can install it onto a Raspberry Pi and install it directly view it on a TV in the same way as the rail service was.
So that means that you can access it actually via the buttons on the remote. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's right. And we're also working on a way to do it via digital TV, but that's a wee bit away yet. So that's rather than plugging it into the composite video port. Obviously nowadays we are starting to get to the point where TVs don't have analog ports anymore. So we're working on a thing that will allow you to use it via digital channel. Obviously, just internal. We haven't got permission from Ofcom to broadcast it. But we'll work on that as well.
Yeah. No, well, there might be something under a sort of like a community remit, maybe. But that's interesting that you would be able to actually, go through the box, because more and more televisions, as you say, are missing them RCA or AV plugs at the back, and even the Raspberry Pis now. I think the latest ones don't have that support anymore.
Yeah, so one of the problems I know is that the latest firmware and operating system doesn't even support Raspberry teletext, which is what we use to put teletext data on a Raspberry Pi's video output. So that's already a problem. We have to use the legacy system to be able to do this still. So even that sort of shows you that you know there may be problems coming down the road, but we should be able to code it. In theory, the new Pi 5 should be better for doing this, but it depends on somebody writing the software for it, and it would need to be somebody a lot more intelligent than I am. So we'll just have to wait for that.
Yeah, it's kind of strange, really, that we're witnessing obsolescence again. But very quickly. I mean, the Pi's only been around 10 years. It's already sort of like wheedling out things that it doesn't think it needs and calling it legacy. But it's the things that we rely on to keep teletext going as such.
It's an interesting
Yeah.
point, because I know this is going off topic slightly, but you do see that a lot. I mean, stuff that was invented back in, well, the 70s, 80s, a lot of that would have still, well, I mean, teletext kept going for 40 odd years, near enough, give or take. Whereas a lot of things now, especially things that come out, Kickstarters and things like that, they last, maybe 2 or 3 years. Then the company goes bust. It's reliant on a cloud app or something. That disappears, and suddenly the product becomes a brick. So it just shows you how things move on.
It does. It does. And it also goes to show probably how, the human psyche just moves on as well, and sort of can quickly forget. So things become sort of nostalgic, I guess. But so Nathan, I would like to, know really. I mean, what was your first experience of teletext? I mean, how old were you and when was it?
Well, I'm only 22 at the moment. So CEEFAX the digital switchover happened in 2012 when I was 11. So I don't have, I was too young to have a massive interest in it at the time, but I do remember trying to find things on it, find some of the pages in the index and getting really upset because, well, not upset, but really annoyed because the index page it was a carousel and it kept changing before I could type the page number in. And I remember my dad would have sat with BBC One on, looking through the latest headlines. So that was my memory of it. And I don't remember teletext as in teletext limited. I think it had already left the air by the time I was old enough to remember it. I remember there was something on Watch UTV here, but I can't remember. I don't think there was much. It must have been one of those sort of holding services. But I remember at Digital Switchover, I got to stay up. It happened around about 11:30, and I got to stay up late to watch it going off because my dad knew that I would like to see that as something interesting. So, and I really sort of forgot about teletext and CEEFAX for a long time after that. It wasn't until maybe 2015 or so, a couple of years later, that I've always had a keen interest in analog technology, and especially TV and broadcast stuff. And that was from that. I had some old equipment and that I used to generate sort of TV things around the house. And I got gifted a Raspberry Pi. There's like a competition in school that I won, and the prize was a Raspberry Pi. So I got this Raspberry Pi, and I was using it to do a couple of different things, but ultimately I wanted to use it to do something that would make like more broadcast sort of stuff, like try and emulate something. So I knew there was two things that I could think of that I couldn't do at the time that I wanted to be able to do. One of them was NICAM stereo sound, which doesn't sound very exciting, but it's interesting the way it works more than anything else. So that's why I wanted to try and do that. And the other thing was teletext. And I happened to come across it at a really good time, because literally that year, I think it was when the main code that was on the go at the time for doing that with a Raspberry Pi was pretty new. Because up until that point, the only way of doing it was to use custom hardware. But I think if it wasn't just like literally within the last couple of months, it was, pretty recent that Alistair Buxton had written Raspberry Teletext that allowed you to do it right on the Pi. So it took me a wee while to get that set up, but once I got it set up, I had a working teletext system on the living room TV for the first time in whatever 3 or 4 years it was since DSO. And from that, obviously, then the next thing was, well, this is great. I had a couple of like handwritten pages and stuff on it, but even at that stage, there wasn't a TFAX or anything. There were no pre-generated services as such. So my immediate next thought was, right, well, now I have this, I want to have something interesting on it. I want to have something useful on it. So this natural step for me was to try and recreate what I remembered, and what I remembered was CEEFAX. And again, timing was great, because literally within around that time, Peter Kwan released what I think was called at the time Make News, I think, which was a small collection of PHP scripts that went onto the BBC News website and downloaded the latest headlines, and through a couple of different steps converted those into CEEFAX pages. Now, I think even by the time he had uploaded it, it was older code. I think he'd used it for like a previous like festival thing or something, and it was a wee bit out of date because it didn't work perfectly. I remember that. And like at that stage, I had never wrote any code. I wasn't a coder of any great use, shall we say. But I got this code anyway, and basically fiddled with it. And it was between a combination of me playing around with it, and also emailing Peter Kwan and annoying his head, that I managed to get it to work. And that gave me page 100. It gave me the news index 102, and then the news pages 104 to 124. And that was how the NMS CEEFAX service started. That was literally what it started off with. And from then, obviously the first thing I wanted to do was try and add a few more things. So I think the next thing I added was the Northern Ireland news on 160, because as I've said, obviously, I mean, to be completely honest, I'm sort of more interested in the actual broadcast side of it than I am, or than I was, shall we say, the actual content. So it was more about having something to experiment with, but also at the same time, I wanted it to be useful. I didn't want it to be like a bunch of test pages, because while that would have given me something to play with, it's not really very useful, which sort of wastes your time a bit. So I thought if I had something that was actually like useful information that was beneficial not only to me, but to everybody else in my house. I know it's not a massive target audience, but there you go.
Might be 100% retention rate though.
Well, exactly, yeah. I thought if it was something useful like that, it would make things more interesting. So I started off doing that, and yeah, I just got really hooked on the whole teletext system, and I just from then on, I was sort of obsessed with it, really, and I've not stopped since. So what's that? We're on, must be 7 or 8 years now that we've been doing CEEFAX. Because the other thing was, obviously, it was great that we could see it in the house, but the next step was letting other people being able to use it. So I had various different viewers on my website at the time, but I know like pretty much nobody knew anything about it, because it wasn't something that I posted on social media or anything at the time. Because I mean, well, apart from anything else, I was still only like maybe 16 or so at this stage, so I wasn't on any big public social services or anything. So it was very much a thing that you might have showed the odd person directly and been like, here, do you see this? This is cool here. But that was about the height of it. So it didn't get a lot of traction, shall we say. But the whole time I was adding more pages, I was adding more stuff that I knew was on there. And a big help for that was the recoveries that are online. Because obviously you have the likes of well, Alistair Cree as well, but also Jason. I've forgotten what the rest of his username is, but you know how I'm talking.
The Grim Fandango. Is it
Yes,
Jason
indeed.
Robertson? Yes.
Jason Robertson.
Yeah,
Yes.
friend of the podcast. Definitely.
Exactly. Yeah. Through his work and a lot of other people's work, I had material to work with, because obviously, I mean, as I said, I was very young at the time, so I don't remember. I mean, I would vaguely remember what some of the news pages and stuff looked like, but apart from that, everything else I sort of had to well, what actually was on that page, and look up and see the headers, the footers, the layouts, the colors, even sort of better what the content was like at the time, so that you could better choose what page you wanted that data to come from. And yeah, so through that I was able to increase the thing until I'd say probably around 2017. As early as that, I had most of the service that I have today. I mean, there's a bit more has been added recently, because I'm changing over the way some of the code works, which is another whole nightmare. But I would say the vast majority of it was there, because I know I had weather, I had the TV listings, I had regional and national news, a few other bits and pieces. So like the core service was there. But as I said, it was very quiet until probably around 2019 or so, I think. And that was when well, there's a couple of things happened at that stage. First of all, I joined on to the teletext Facebook group. So I started following some of the folks are following that chat to see what all was happening. And also I built my first InVision decoder, or at least the first one that worked half decently well. I should explain for anybody who's listening who doesn't know what an InVision decoder is. Basically, in the early days, you didn't have a teletext decoder in your TV. You bought an external box, and all that done was it took the teletext signal, which is out of vision, and made it in vision so that you could see it on your TV. So that's why it's called an InVision decoder, but that's by the by. The point is, it's the system that was used overnight on the likes of BBC Two to do pages from CEEFAX accompanied with the brilliant music that they used. So I wanted to build an InVision decoder to run my internal channel overnight. Well, I mean, it pretty much runs it all the time, but that's beside the point. And as part of that, I was up in Belfast at Tech at the time. So I was working out of the room that I was staying in, and I obviously didn't have a TV system up there. So the next best thing was to stream it to YouTube. So I streamed it to YouTube for testing purposes. And I shared it to the Facebook group, I think. Maybe not the first time, but certainly the second time. And that was when some of the folks on there came on, looked at the thing and said, I know Alistair Cree again specifically says, that's brilliant. You should make that public to everybody. You should make that, that anybody can scroll through this, because, it's a lot better. There's no other recreations like this that are so faithful to the original, because I know there are a couple of web-based things that I've come across that sort of copy the CEEFAX style and a few other bits and pieces, but a lot of them are it's in style only. They're web pages rather than teletext pages, so the widths are all wrong and things like that. And I mean, for the average person, that probably doesn't really matter, but for a nerd like me, you have to have it right,
It can trigger certain people. That's
yeah,
for sure.
yeah. So yeah, the next step then, I made it so that anybody could download it onto their Pis. So that involved setting up a Subversion server, which in hindsight probably isn't the best way to do this, but it's one of these things. It's a bit like how the BBC are stuck doing standard definition video on Freeview. We were in early enough that there was nothing better. There was no better way to do it, so we're sort of stuck doing it that way now. And that was when I got the first couple of people using it with Pis. I used to have a view counter that I could see how many unique addresses were accessing that server and see how many viewers I had. And then obviously the next thing then was getting it on a proper web viewer, because the thing that was on my website at the time was very much a thing that I'd wrote, and it was a bit useless. Carousel pages didn't work. Flashing text didn't work. I mean, not that there's a lot of that in CEEFAX, but you get the idea. There wasn't a huge pile that worked properly on it. And Alistair offered, or rather I said to Alistair, he had created the web viewer, and I messaged him one time and said, can I steal that to use on my website? And I was fully expecting him to be like, well, no, get lost. Because I mean, it's a free, I wasn't, you know how it is. You don't really know. It wasn't available anywhere. So I sort of thought, okay, this is probably something he wants to keep to himself, isn't it? Because it's, his own project. But no, he was really pleased that I'd asked, as far as I could tell. And yeah, we got it set up on my server, and within a couple of days, we now had that service both on my website and on his website. And that was the next step, really. It was there for a year or so, I would say. Just thinking, what year was? Yeah. So it wasn't until then, the end of 2021 or the beginning of 2022, rather, that I was contacted by Jim Watterson, who's media editor at The Guardian, or he was at the time anyway. He probably still is. And he'd been passed on my details by Dan Farriman. Now, I can't remember. I'm still not 100% sure how he found out about the service to ask about it. So I don't know if he's seen. I think there was a fairly popular social media post that I made a couple of days beforehand when Facebook went down. I think that might have been where he saw it, because that was as close as I've ever been to going viral. It was that post, because it got like 1,000 reposts and stuff. So it was nothing like I've ever seen before anyway. And he wanted to do a story on CEEFAX and sort of on me who'd done it, for a sort of a Christmas/New Year's article. Something he said he wanted it to be something fairly light and cheery for Christmas. So he phoned me up and we had a long chat, and a couple of weeks later, I remember he specifically asked me, this is relevant for a moment too, and he says, if we post a link to this, it'll be all right, will it? And I'm just like, well, yeah. And he's just like, yeah, it's not like going to crash the website or, cause any problems, is it? And I'm just like, oh, no, it'll be fine. So you can already guess where this is going. I should say as well that for anybody who doesn't know, again, I host the entire system myself. It doesn't run. It's not because I'm one of these ones who wants to, who's afraid of big companies controlling the internet or anything like that, which is a problem, but it's not the reason I do it. The reason I do it is just because, again, it's something that interests me and I like fiddling with things. So at that time, the server that ran CEEFAX was in my sister's house in Belfast on her internet. So when the article was released in January, the first I knew about it was when I got a message I think I got a message from the server, first of all, complaining about excessive load or something. And then I got a message from my sister to say, do you know anything about why the internet here is not working anymore? And I was just like, no. And yeah, that was when things really went nuts at that stage, because there's a couple of 100,000 people trying to get onto CEEFAX from the Guardian website. Obviously, a few of them at least managed to get on, because it just got more and more and more popular. And both my website and I think Alistair's website as well got huge amounts of traffic, more than they've ever seen before or since. And also, I shared the post on Twitter and a few other things, and again, that got really, really popular. And what was quite funny at that stage was I had all these reporters replying to my post and emailing me to say, would you do an interview with us as well? So I had to do, I think, pretty much most of the tabloids, at least, that come out daily. And I had a couple of radio interviews. And the best one, or what I thought was really funny, and I still don't know how they found this out, but I was in work in Ballygolly, and somebody I should explain, I was in an office at a desk, and then my boss was at the table opposite me, and he had the phone on his desk. Phone rang and it was reception, and Amy says, hi, George. I have somebody on from the BBC here for Nathan. So I had to go over and lift the phone and say, hello. And I don't know how they found out that I worked there, or how they found out that that was the phone number or anything, but they found out some way or other, and they wanted me on Radio Ulster. So I was on Radio Ulster that evening with Jason Robertson, chatting. So that is, it was absolutely mental. And I know for a fact as well from listening back to some of them, like I was not ready for doing interviews. I hope I've got better. I don't know. We'll see when this comes out. But I know at the time, like people, the first thing they always asked me was, well, Nathan, why did you create this service? And I was just like, for fun. It was like, I found that a really hard question to ask, because it's one of these things. And I said to somebody later, like, on the one hand, there's no correct answer for that, but at the same time, there's hundreds of reasons. So it's very hard to say for a radio interview. But fortunately, or I like to think anyway, by the last 2 or 3 of them, I'd sort of got a clue, because I know I had to do Radio 2 with Jeremy Vine, and I had to do News Talk, which is a Republic of Ireland channel radio station, and had to do that with a fella, Sean Moncrief. And those were both longer form interviews. I think one of the problems with the first ones were you only had like 30 seconds or a minute, and you were very aware of that because you had them in your ear the whole time. So you knew that you were under pressure, and pressure can get to you sometimes, can't it? So whereas those ones, I knew I had a good 10-15 minutes, so I wasn't, and also I had experience of what everybody was asking, so I had a better idea what they were going to ask and what was going to happen. So that was my 15 minutes of fame. And it did help massively, because after that there was a lot more sort of permanent viewers to the channel, or to the website, sorry. And it's, well, I mean, there's still a fair few people who looks at it. I know there's people emails to say they look at it every day. There's even a chap over in America, and over in America, obviously they didn't have teletext, but I believe he's originally from here, and he's working over there now, but he wanted to use that. And so he has a monitor set up. I built him an InVision decoder box with an HDMI output, which is really rare for teletext. And he has that plugged into a monitor of some description over there, and he has the page 100 headlines on there, and he keeps an eye on the headlines literally from CEEFAX in America. It's crazy.
That's incredible then. So yeah, so you got lots of feedback from people that cared to actually drop you a line and tell you how they felt about the service.
Yeah, I got there was a contact address. I'm trying to remember. I think it was just on the CEEFAX contact page. I don't think there was one just on the website, which also tells you something, because it means people actually went to the bother of looking that up on CEEFAX, which I literally have just thought of. So there you go. And they emailed the address, and I got all these emails, and it was mostly from people who said, "Oh yeah, that's amazing. I remember I used to check this every day." There was a few people who said things like, "Oh, could you do such and such? This page isn't working." So that was how there's a couple more sport pages have been added recently, a few bits and pieces like that people specifically asked for. I had a few people offering me special, like, internal feeds for generating stuff from, which was very nice, because I'm sure someone pays top dollar for that, and I just have it for free. And I had I think probably my favorite one was the couple of people who emailed and said, "I used to work on CEEFAX and this is brilliant." I had, like, even I think he's John, but I can't remember what his last name is, that done the interview on BBC Breakfast. Like, he posted something afterwards and said, "Oh, as my first, like, BBC journalist job was editing CEEFAX, so this is really, really amazing." And I even had a couple of people who engineered, like, the actual hardware behind the scenes. So I remember somebody messaged me and said, "Oh, back in, I think it was the 80s, they developed, so you know those handheld TVs that are about the size, well, of a mobile phone, that came out sort of the late 90s-ish? They had invented one of those that could do teletext. Now, for whatever reason, it never came to market, but he sent me a picture of the actual prototype unit, so it was a real thing, and I was just like, that so needs to be in a museum somewhere. So hopefully we can make that happen sometimes, but I don't know what happened or what. I know he said that it didn't work anymore because obviously, I suppose the same reason that none of those pocket TVs work anymore, the capacitors have all leaked. But he said it was a working prototype and it was really cutting edge at its time to shrink all the components down into that size of a device. And you can just imagine if something like that had come out, like that would really have been an early mobile, what we know now as a mobile phone, because you could have got your news and weather and stuff from a handheld device. I think that would have been amazing. And you can imagine a sort of alternate reality where that came out and you have handheld teletext, but well, whatever, it didn't come out, but I still thought it was very interesting.
Oh, it is, and yeah, you're right, because if that had come out, we weren't all carrying phones around then, and it might have been the case that it was marketed because they thought we'd all watch television, but we didn't. We had the TV section, the contrast turned right down, and only had the teletext on, and it might have been the way phones were. People go, oh well, everyone will talk on their mobile phone, but it's probably the least used function now on a mobile device.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I would love to. It's one of the things. I have a project list that's like 1 million pages long, and one of the things on there is build a handheld teletext receiver. Of course, the problem is nowadays I don't have a broadcast TV signal to pick up to use it, which makes things infinitely harder because now I need either to make it connect to Wi-Fi or else transmit my own low frequency signal, and well, that's not so bad. Making it legal is bad, but anyway, that's by the by.
That might be there might be an anonymous group of parallel teletext engineers that might try hack RF one day, but we shall never know.
That would be cool. Yeah,
that would be. I think there might be talk of thinking about that sort of thing, maybe for Teletext's 50th birthday party coming up in Cambridge this year in 2024.
that would be amazing. I would get my amateur license to do that.
You could use mine. You could use my call sign as long as I'm next to you. So you'd be all right. There's quite a few hams actually, so I think you'd be all right. You could go right up to a 2E0, I think, so you'd be fine. I noticed you've had to, well, not had to, but the Sport was the last thing to come on because of it updates very, very quickly. But it looks like you've cracked that now, and you're getting a new following really for the for the Sport output that you do as well on NMS.
Yeah, I think more than anything else, that was sort of a missed, what would you say, a sort of a missed opportunity, I suppose, on my part, because in our house, we're not big sport fans here. So that was really why it didn't ever appear, because it was I only started adding that because, well, it was on CEEFAX, I can do it now. It wasn't until it got more popular, shall we say, that I realized, people who are into sport really love CEEFAX. That's an untapped market. So I've started off with just like the news pages from football, and then I started adding in league tables because I know that's a big thing, and the scoreboard. So the scoreboard on CEEFAX shows you the days. But before they started, it shows you today's matches, what's coming up, and then also whenever they're in progress, it shows you the latest goals that have scored and what time that was at or what minutes that was at, and then at the end it shows you the final result. And I do try every so often to stick those on Twitter if I know that it's something like a high-end match, that everybody's going to be interested in, I'll try and post the results page. I don't usually remember, though, because, as I say, it's not really on my radar. So, but yeah, it's on there anyway. So I know people like to see that.
Yeah, it's a great touchstone because I was very much football and news. So yeah, I can imagine a lot more people like that. I mean, all you need to do is shout out 301, 302, 303, and people know exactly what you're talking about.
I was actually contacted by a football club, shall we say, to recreate some pages for some kind of history thing they were doing. But I never saw anything more about it, so I'm not sure if they shelved the idea eventually or what happened. I just know that it was a couple of years ago now, because it wasn't that long after that. They contacted me and they basically said, if we gave you a year and the details, would you be able to make the page that would have been right for that time? So I was helped by recovery efforts. I got the closest date to what they were looking for, and then just fixed the scores, or the league table, I think it was. But I don't recall ever seeing anything come out of that. So I don't know. Maybe they never actually used that in the end. It seemed to be something they were very much doing on the back burner whenever they had a chance, sort of thing. So I suppose anything more important would have took its place. But oh well.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, I know that there are other enterprises out there that do football mugs and things like that. So it's
Most of them aren't, right?
yes, I do. I look at the color and the spacing, but yeah, it's yeah, that's where people who work with teletext can probably see that a lot more, the accuracy, the deficiencies in the accuracy. But there you go, it goes on a coffee mug, and the person that's drinking out of it loves teletext, so that's the main thing, I guess. And
Yes.
yeah, and so what's so you're saying that you're trying to get this utilizing, well, what the boffins would call a DVB signal, would that be right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, would that still involve a Raspberry Pi, or would you be able just to sort of like get that off the off the internal internet connection of the DVB box?
So at the moment, the way we're doing it, right? So you have like a USB dongle that plugs into the computer, and that does the transmitting.
Oh, right.
So I plugged that into just a coax signal. But the magic is in the code that generates the signal for it to transmit, if that makes sense, because it's a digital data stream, and you would think, like, how hard can it be? Well, as it turns out, very because the timing is super critical. The TVs, especially, we've discovered cheap TVs really don't have any margin for error. So if
Right.
you transmit something that's in any way not in spec, you'll get jumps, you'll get weird audio fluctuations, you'll get things randomly not working. So yeah, we're working on it, but it's not quite there yet. But the idea, yeah, would be that will plug into a Pi. At the moment, I'm running it on my computer simply for ease of experimentation. But the idea is that eventually it'll run on a Pi. And I would say, I'm not 100% on this, but I would say the Pi on its own is probably able to generate at least one channel. Now, it might not have much on it, but it would be able to do teletext at least. And then my eventual plan is to build a 4-channel modulator that takes 4 HDMI inputs and makes a 4-channel multiplex. But that's down the road. That's not easy. If you can't see me at the moment, obviously, but on my desk behind me here is just an absolute pile of circuit boards and HDMI leads and various other bits and pieces here. So it's in progress, but it's not quite there yet.
So a lot of people are getting in contact with you. Are there any people who are trying to sort of like speak to you on a commercial level, or
not with CEEFAX? No. I think there's a number of reasons why that might be, but I don't think we need to go into all that right now. The lowdown is no. Unfortunately, nobody is paying for CEEFAX. CEEFAX remains fully my home project. The only thing that I do have on it now that I didn't have back when I started it, there is now a donations link, because people, especially when I was in all the papers, said, oh, I would really love to support this, but there's nothing to do it. And at the time, my thing was always, well, I can't really get money for it. And that's true, I can't get money for it, but I can try to cover the server costs.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Literally all it is. It just sort of covers the domain name, stuff like that. So that's on there, but I really don't make anything from it. It's still fully just for the fun of it, really. Now, the only thing I do have now, so there has been a couple of people have contacted me for doing the inserters that I build, which take a normal video signal and add teletext to it. So there's a company, and I would love to tell you more about it, but the lowdown is there's a company that does an internal cable service throughout a number of buildings, and they use some of my inserters to run a teletext service on those. So that's one place. There are a few other sort of smaller orders. Like I was in touch with I can't actually remember the name of the company now, but there was a company that does some of that betting stuff, I think, and they run a feed. I should know what the crowd is, but anyway, they run a feed to some places in Europe, and they needed a Envision decoder to monitor it. But unfortunately, the engineer who was looking for it was really more interested in getting my design files to build his own than he was in just buying one. So I sent him over some of the details, and then he disappeared. So, but oh well, it's all good fun, isn't it?
Have you ever considered perhaps doing a shadow service, which is a bit more, say, more like an ITV style, or more of an Airtel version as well?
It's something I have played with the idea. There's a couple of different ideas I've played around with. I thought about doing a sort of teletext limited without the limited. The problem with that is as I've mentioned before, the main reason I do CEEFAX is because that's what I remember. I don't remember teletext limited, so I don't really feel like I would be the right person to do that. Now, if somebody wanted to do that, I would be only too happy to help out, in terms of the code that runs CEEFAX, which I dubbed SIMS, which stands for CEEFAX Information Management System. It's very posh sounding, but my mum came up with that acronym, so I can't take credit for it. But yeah.
And you've got to do it if your mum says as well.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So if somebody wanted to do that, absolutely, I'll help out. But I don't know. I just feel like I might not be the right person to do that. Apart from anything else, I already run one teletext service. That's plenty. The other thing is, yes, as you said, Airtel finished up. Oh, it must be only a few months ago, if that. And I actually, whenever I first heard that they were closing it down, I thought, what would be really class is if I rushed something in and literally took its place as it finished. As soon as it went off the air, I posted up, here's the new version. But for various reasons, I decided not to do that. But it's something that I've definitely thought about. If I thought there would be interest, I would probably do that. But again, as I said, it's the same problem. I don't really remember Airtel. We live sort of near enough to the border that we get Sairview, which is the Republic's equivalent of Freeview, and so at that time we still have two antennas. You've one pointed at Bracker Mountain for digital TV here, and then you've one pointed down south. Well, it's actually pointed west for where we are, but that's beside the point. For TV from there. But the problem was, in the analog days, it was too noisy to get teletext. You could just about watch it without getting angry, but you couldn't get teletext. It was no way you could have got teletext on it. So I don't really remember Airtel. And obviously now we have digital. You can watch it pretty well, and we were able to get the MHEG, I think it is, version of Airtel. but I don't have the means to recreate MHEG services at the moment. Whether I ever do or not remains to be seen. With the digital stuff, you never know. It might be something I look into, but to be honest, I think people love the CEEFAX, the original teletext style a lot more. You know, it's a lot more well known. It's a lot more interesting to play with, and it's, believe it or not, it's a lot more accessible because the tools for doing MHEG are all very much licensed by broadcasters and stuff. But anyway, I've got off topic. Sorry. So again, I don't really remember it, so I would need to go back through recoveries and stuff like that to try and recreate services. And the other thing, I had thought about launching one that's completely my own, and I was going to call it NMS Intel, and I called it that. There's a couple of reasons why that name. It's it's sort of a play on Intel as in intelligence, and it's also a play on telefax and Intelfax, and all sorts of names are sort of played on with that. So I thought of that, and what I'm going to do with that one is I'm doing a YouTube video at the moment. I have done a couple of YouTube videos on running your own internal TV service, and the next one in the series is supposed to be teletext, which is going to be one video. And then I realized, no, there's no way this is going to fit in a one video. So what my plan is, I'm going to release a sort of a similar length to the other one video, sort of going, here's how you can create some static pages and run it on a Pi. Really simple, and then just say, I realized this was not going to fit into a video, so I'm going to have to make this into a series later. And my plan is, and now I'm saying it on here, I'm going to have to stick to it. So this is a sort of this is the reason I'm doing it. My plan is that I will release a sort of a cut down version of the code that runs CEEFAX, and do a couple of videos just showing, here's how you can do some simple stuff with this if you want to do your own. And the demo service I was going to use to do that was going to be Intel. So that was so that it's sort of so that I'm not just going, here is the massive CEEFAX service I built. You know, here is one I made earlier. I don't want to do that because that puts people off. So I just want to go right, starting right from scratch. Here we have this. Here is how I designed the index page. Here is how I can get news from somewhere. Or whatever, and go from there. But we'll see how that plays out. You know how it is. I might not ever do that in the next 40 years, but we'll try. It's on the list. It's on the list.
No, exactly. All right, that's brilliant. So okay, so where would we find your teletext service online?
So the CEEFAX service is available at www.nathanmediaservices.co.uk/CEEFAX, and that'll get you to the viewer, and it automatically starts up, and there's a remote for typing in the numbers at the side and all, and that'll work on PC, mobile, wherever you like, pretty much. You can also, and you'll see down at the bottom of it, there's instructions on how you can get it running on a Pi. I think those may be a little bit out of date, but they should still work. You know, if you use a bit of common sense. I need to update it, but yeah. And then there's also a link there to my YouTube channel, which has pages from CEEFAX going out live 24/7.
Brilliant. Okay, and are you still on X? Are you active on X or anywhere else?
Yeah, I'm still on. Yeah, probably the main one is X. So if you look up Avrovulcan XH607, you'll get my account. There's not a huge amount goes on there, but I try and post screenshots of interesting CEEFAX things from time to time.
Yeah. And if anyone was interested in sort of you know, offsetting some of your server costs and all that, is there a page that they can go to for that as well?
So that's on, I believe it's Ko-fi, you pronounce it. There is a link at the bottom of the CEEFAX page again to that. But I think it's the same account username. So if you look up that Avrovulcan X607, you should get me pretty much anywhere. I'm also on Threads and Blue Sky. So if there's anybody on there who wants to follow me there, please do, because there's only like 3 on it, which means there's no point in posting anything there. So it's just a sort of a ghost page. There's nothing on it, but I'm on there, and if I get a few followers on there, I'll try and post stuff.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think Blue Sky is it looks lovely, but I've got more invites than followers. So yeah,
I'm exactly the same.
yeah.
I was just gonna say, if anybody wants to get on Blue Sky, I have like 5 or 6 invites that I have nobody to give to. So if you want, let me know and I'll give you one.
Oh, that's brilliant. Okay, well, before we wrap up, Nathan, was there anything else that you wanted to say that I might not have covered in the in the main thrust of the podcast?
I think the only thing that I may not have mentioned up until now is the pages from CEEFAX stream, which I alluded to a moment ago. So I used to do that. I would have done, a couple of hours in an evening every week or so. That was when I was up in Belfast, and and I'd done that on and off for a while, and there was a few people tried to run 24/7 ones, and they run it from Alistair's web viewer. The difference with mine is it runs from an actual decoder. It runs from an actual hardware decoder in a rack with a composite video output, so you get that delightful crawl and smeariness on it. So that it's very much to look like the old BBC Two version. But I now run that 24/7, so it runs all the time on YouTube, as long as I haven't tripped over a plug or something, and then it might go off. But the rest of the time it's live. And I said there's a link to that at the bottom of the CEEFAX website. But again, you can find it on YouTube. If you just look up pages from CEEFAX, it's usually the top 2 or 3 results.
Oh, well, that's absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Nathan, and keep it blocky for the future. And I'm hoping that I'll see you in person in Cambridge for the 50th birthday party in September.
Indeed, yes. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks again to Nathan for his kindness and generosity for appearing on this podcast. You can also leave feedback by getting me on X at teletextile. You can go to the Discord, where the join-up notes are actually in the notes of this podcast. If you feel that way inclined, you can buy me a Ko-fi at ko-fi.com/bytehigh. Any donation goes towards offsetting the costs of the podcast, which aren't mighty, but any little does help. And thank you to everybody who has done so already. Byte High No Limit was presented by me, Carlos, and is a Byte High No Limit production. And until next time, keep it blocky. That idiot Jeremy Vine not firing questions at you, and he just wants to bloody get his listeners worked right up, and he was more hung up about the fact that you were like a quarter of his age.
the Jeremy Vine one, I done that live from my office at work, and so I was sitting trying to do this. You're sort of very aware that you're sitting in an office by yourself, but there's probably a few hundred, at least probably a few 100,000, if not more than that, people listening. And then he asks something that you really hadn't thought of, and it's just completely in at the deep end. You're just like, but there we go. That's what happens.
That day, I think was it on that one, or was that on the BBC Breakfast? But Novak Djokovic was in the news for not having a jab.
Breakfast.
That was breakfast. Yeah. And that really, I thought, what an arsehole for doing that to you, because you're all primed, we're all there waiting, and then it's sort of like, and you could tell that I think the presenters really wanted to speak to you more than go to the Novak Djokovic for the 15th time in Sydney. It was sort of like, we want something new to talk about. So, but yeah,
no, you can imagine behind the scenes that was really nerve-wracking, because I was sat up here and I had my laptop sat you've seen my setup, so I was sitting with the big monitor stack, and I wanted that behind me because I thought it would look cool. But the problem with that was the TV's up here, so I couldn't actually see what was happening. All I had was a Zoom link. I joined on this Zoom link, and it just came up, sorry, this room is in use. So I was like, all right, okay, they're probably interviewing someone else or whatever. So that went on for, I'd say, a good 10, 15 minutes. And I was really starting to think, what is going on here? Have they scrapped this at the last minute? And I picked up my phone, and I was just dialing in the number of the journalist who had contacted me. She'd given me her phone number, and I was literally about to phone her up, and she rang me and says, or no, maybe not her, but it was maybe a withheld number from the studio or something. And I got this number anyway, and I was just like, from the gallery, oh, is that Zoom link not working? We've just sent you another one. Get on quickly. And I was like, oh, this is a panic now. So I had to join on. You join on, it's quite good fun. You join on Zoom, and you get through to the master control room in London. So I got this engineer on who was very nice. And then they passed me through to Salford, which is where breakfast is done. And they that got me through to the gallery to chat again. And then they said, right, next thing you're going to hear is program sound, and you'll be on. And that was it. So it was a real last minute thing. And you could sort of tell that we were a wee bit pushed for time, but oh well, what can you do? It's TV.
Yeah, that's it. That's show business, mate. That's show business.
That's showbiz, yeah.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.